This is a top-selling manga, but nobody is talking about it. Kaiju No. 8 has been one of the most popular manga since its debut. It's consistently in the top 10 of Manga Plus, it's in the top 20 highest-selling manga for this year, and Season 2 is one of the most anticipated anime for this summer. But it was recently announced that the manga should be ending in just a couple of chapters, and everyone got really confused. Mainly because a lot of people had kind of forgotten about this series even though it's super popular. So a lot of people are wondering what happened to this series. You would think if it's this popular then people wouldn't shut up about it. So how come nobody is talking about this series even though they're all reading it? That's why I want to talk about my experience with Kaiju No. 8, look at the response from its own fans, and explain why this series has the same problem as every other battle series. But before we make any comparisons, first let's talk about why Kaiju No. 8 is so popular, because if you don't follow it or you're a new fan, you might not realize that this series got most of its fans from the initial hype. Kaiju No. 8 started 5 years ago back in 2020. If I remember correctly, it's always been on Jump Plus. So it came out at about the same time as series like Dandadan that would make Jump Plus more popular. And while not right away, it didn't take long for people to start hyping up this manga. I can't find it now, but back in the day, I remember either Ohara or some big YouTuber had posted a video saying Kaiju No. 8 was the next Attack on Titan. And it's not like they made this up. Even today, you can see tons of comparisons between the two. Obviously, the main reason is because of the premise. Attack on Titan is about titans and people that can turn into titans to fight titans. Kaiju No. 8 is about kaiju and the people that can turn into kaiju to fight kaiju. On the surface, it's almost bar for bar. So it's not hard to imagine why a series so much like Attack on Titan would quickly become one of the most popular manga. People like kaiju, they like cool transformations, and they like big fights. Another reason people like Kaiju No. 8 is because of the art. I wouldn't say it's my favorite art style, but I have to admit some of the spreads in Kaiju No. 8 look incredible. On top of that, Kaiju No. 8 has some really cool characters. Kafka is a decent main character, but obviously his transformation is cool. You also have his friend Mina, who uses a giant sniper rifle and just so happens to have a pet tiger. There's Soshiro, who's kinda like a badass ninja. There's Shinomiya, who kills kaiju with a giant axe. There's a ton of characters, but you get the idea. So when you get a series that's basically the next Attack on Titan, and it's drawn well, and it's got cool characters, it's not hard to understand why everyone started reading this manga right away. There's also another factor that contributed to its success that nobody really brings up, but is definitely worth mentioning. That is the fact that Kafka was part of a small trend of older main characters. Kaiju No. 8 actually came out right at the same time as Tokyo Revengers. In that manga, you have Takemichi, a guy in his 20s who decides he wants a do-over and starts to recreate his identity. In the beginning, he and Kafka have very similar arcs. Kafka is also an older guy. He tried to join the defense force and failed, but now he wants to start over and make himself into a hero. It was a short-lived trend that really hasn't seen any new iterations, but at the time it was seen as a refreshing take on the shonen protagonist, something that helped Kaiju No. 8 stand out from other shonen. And because Kaiju No. 8 stood out, it quickly became one of the best-selling manga. By volume 4, it had already reached 4 million copies in circulation. Since then, the sales have gone down a bit, but it continues to be in the top 20 best-selling manga. And like I said in the beginning, it's almost always in the top 5 most read manga on Manga Plus, which means people are reading it just as much as One Piece, Boruto, Chainsaw Man, and Dandadan. And yet, everyone on the internet was shocked to find out the manga is ending. But real quick, before I say more on that, make sure to check out my next live stream. I stream reviews of new manga chapters every Sunday, Monday, and Thursday. But like I was saying, about a month ago, it was announced that Kaiju number 8 would be ending soon and that it only had 2 chapters left. This is kind of a new trend for Shueisha, starting with Jujutsu Kaisen and My Hero Academia, where they kind of just tell you a series is ending out of nowhere. Although with those series, it kind of made sense. The problem with Kaiju number 8 is that apparently nobody saw it coming. Even fans who were caught up with the manga seemed like they didn't see it coming. Not to say that Kaiju number 8 must have been cut short, but more like nobody was paying attention. We just talked about how Kaiju number 8 was one of the biggest manga, but when they announced it's almost over, it was like everyone had forgotten about the series, which prompted me to say how weird it is because it's so popular but nobody recommends it. And my god, did I get the best responses to a tweet I've ever seen. These responses included It Does Nothing New, the most nothing manga, most okay series ever, extremely meh, radio silent, hella linear, or my personal favorite, industry plant manga. The last one is legendary because that's basically like saying Kaiju number 8 is the Kevin Hart of manga. Like behind the writer are 20 other writers and all the editors controlling everything more than usual. Clearly, the takeaway is that Kaiju number 8 isn't anything special. Nobody can say it's bad, but it's not good enough that people think to recommend it. Naturally, you're probably wondering what happened, because years ago everyone was saying you needed to read the next Attack on Titan, but now it's almost over and everyone's like, check it out if you want a chill series, I guess. So what happened? The short answer is the creator just kind of gave up. Matsumoto started off with a fun premise and great characters, but the longer the series went on, the less he fleshed things out. Personally, I was reading Kaiju number 8 every week, but I dropped it around chapter 60 or so. Then after about a year, I tried catching back up, but I noticed the same problem. Kafka wasn't fun anymore. When you first start Kaiju number 8, Kafka is a really fun character. He's a dude that's almost 30 cleaning up monster guts for a living. He remembers how he used to compete with his best friend. He sees how she lived out her dreams and he fell behind. So while it is cool to see him become a kaiju hybrid, the great thing about Kafka was that he wasn't a kid starting high school or a kid going on some adventure. He was an adult that tried, failed, had given up, but decided he wanted a do-over, which as someone in my late 20s, that's a lot more relatable. So I kept reading Kaiju number 8 because I was rooting for Kafka, and you see him struggle in those first few arcs. He still sucks as a soldier, he's nowhere close to catching up to Mina, and now he has to compete with a bunch of kids who are half his age. To this day, it was one of the best weekly experiences, and I wish they would make another character like this. And I say that partly because Kafka stopped being that character. Ironically, Kafka represents the fall of Kaiju number 8. He started off really strong, but after chapter 50 or so, he pretty much catches up to Mina, so his only motivation is getting stronger. By this point, he becomes a one-dimensional character that isn't nearly as interesting as when we first met him. Pretty much what happens to the plot as well. We start off with Kafka getting into the defense force. Then they have to fight a bunch of kaiju and they meet these hidden bosses. Then in the next arc, they fight even more kaiju and the bosses have new abilities. Then in the next arc, the bosses have more new abilities. Hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. To be fair, I dropped the series around chapter 80 or so I could totally be talking out of my butt, but considering there's only 40 chapters, I tend to doubt there were any dramatic changes. And the response to my tweet seems to confirm this. One person said the plot is super straightforward. That confirms that the arcs kinda just follow the same path. It also implies that there really aren't any interesting plot twists. One person reflected my own feelings and said although they liked the early story, the later story doesn't have anything strong to say thematically. You even have someone outright say all it does is introduce one new monster after another on a loop until the end. So really, Kaiju number 8 has the classic Dragon Ball problem. It avoids impactful plot development and opts for raising the stakes with bigger bad guys. But something people don't like to say about Dragon Ball is that Toriyama manga always added fun plot twists. When they went to Namek, we saw all kinds of crazy characters, and we got a bunch of lore. When Frieza came back and we met the androids, we also met Trunks and found out that he was Vegeta and Bulma's son from the future. Even the Buu arc had its share of meaningful changes. You can use that formula of raising the stakes and still have a fun story. But if you completely rely on that formula, then that's when you lose people. Kaiju relies on that formula, and that's why nobody really thinks it's special. The other side to this problem is that you have dozens of side characters, and none of them are memorable. Mina is cool for the first half of the story, but she starts to become an afterthought. Shinomiya kind of becomes an important character halfway through the story, but she doesn't really stand out from characters in other manga. In other words, Shinomiya feels like a character you've basically already met. She's cool, but there's nothing about her that makes her special. And the same is true for most of the characters. They're cool, and some of them are actually pretty fun, but none of them are so interesting that you're really emotionally invested. Kafka had that going on before, but he slowly became a generic main character that just wanted to get stronger. And that's why Kaiju number 8 is just okay. It starts out great, but unless you really like battle series, or unless you really like these characters, there's no strong reason to keep reading. And that's why nobody really recommends it. I should point out that a lot of people claimed they were gatekeeping. Basically, everyone really is reading it, but they're keeping it quiet so that the normies don't ruin it for them or something. And that's just not true. If a series is good enough, people are gonna hype it up. I mean, that's what happened to Dandadan. People had tried for years to talk about that series, but before the anime, it never really stuck. But once the anime came out and everyone could watch it on Netflix, suddenly you couldn't avoid Dandadan. Even when we tried to stop people like Chibi Reviews from covering it, that obviously didn't happen. So to claim Kaiju fans somehow huddled up and decided they were going to hide this series like they were the Fellowship and this was the One Ring, I'm calling baloney on this one. If Kaiju number 8 were really that good, people wouldn't shut up about it. But it's the opposite. Nobody is talking about Kaiju number 8 because nobody cares. A lot of people are reading it because they've been reading it and they want to see it end. And that's fine. Nobody can really say it's a bad series. But compared to how it used to be, it certainly seems like it fell off. Everyone is reading it, but nobody recommends it. But maybe I'm wrong. How would you rate Kaiju number 8? How does it compare to other manga? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. Also, make sure to become a channel member. You get custom badges and emojis to use in live streams, you can pick which series I cover next, and you can even get credited in future videos. Also check out my other anime videos, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.